the channel where drama sizzles and revenge burns hotter than ever. If you love jaw dropping twists, bold characters, and stories that keep you guessing till the end, you're in the right place. Subscribe and dive into gripping tales of betrayal, karma, and ultimate payback. Get ready for unforgettable moments and satisfying endings, only on Crazy Pepper. Hit that bell and let the drama begin. The bourbon burned less than the truth. I sat in my cramped home office at 2 in the morning, surrounded by towers of receipts and the ghostly glow of my laptop screen, and another late-night wrestling with QuickBooks for clients who paid me just enough to keep the lights on. The house creaked around me like an old ship, filled with 23 years of marriage and mounting silence. Marta's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She'd left it there again, careless as always. The screen lit up with a notification that made my blood freeze. Can't wait to feel you again tomorrow night. Same place, same time. You drive me crazy. Beautiful. The message was from Joel Brennan, Joel Damn Brennan, who sold used cars with the enthusiasm of a revival preacher and the morals of a snake oil salesman. Joel, who'd been coming to our barbecues for 3 years, shaking my hand and drinking my beer while apparently planning to screw my wife. I stared at the phone like it might explode. 23 years, 2 kids, a mortgage we'd finally gotten ahead of. All of it crumbling because my wife decided she needed some excitement in her life. The smart thing would have been to confront her. The mature thing would have been counseling. But as I sat there in my threadbare pajamas, listening to Marta snore peacefully upstairs, I felt something darker settling into my chest. Something that whispered about justice and payback and making them both understand exactly what they'd thrown away. I opened my laptop and started researching. If Marta wanted to play games, I'd show her how a real strategist operated. Joel's car dealership sat on Route 9 like a carnival that had given up trying. Faded bunting fluttered between rusted light poles, and hand-painted signs promised, "Deals so good they're criminal." The irony wasn't lost on me. I parked across the street at the Dunkin' Donuts and watched through my windshield. Joel strutted around the lot in a cheap suit, his belly straining against his shirt as he gestured wildly at a young couple looking at a Honda with more miles than a cross-country trucker. My phone rang. Marta. "Hey, honey, I'm working late again tonight. Big presentation tomorrow." "Sure," I said, watching Joel slap the Honda's roof hard enough to rattle the windows. "What time should I expect you?" "Oh, probably not until after 11. You know how these agency things go." I knew exactly how they went. They went to the Sleepy Inn Motel on the other side of town, where the rooms rented by the hour and the sheets were changed optimistically. "I'll leave dinner in the fridge," I told her. "You're the best, Danny. Love you." The words hit like a slap. I ended the call and watched Joel close his deal with an enthusiastic handshake. The couple drove off in their overpriced Honda, probably thinking they'd gotten a bargain. At 7:30, Joel locked up the dealership and headed home. I followed at a distance, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was insane. I was a 47-year-old accountant trailing a used car salesman like some discount private investigator, but I needed to see it. I needed to know for certain that my marriage was really over before I decided what to do about it. Joel lived in a split-level ranch that screamed midlife crisis. Perfectly manicured lawn, oversized American flag, and a Corvette parked in the driveway like a monument to his own perceived virility. I parked down the street and waited. At 8:15, he emerged wearing cologne I could smell from 50 yards away. He climbed into the Corvette and roared off toward downtown. I followed, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The Sleepy Inn looked exactly like what it was, a place where people came to do things they couldn't do at home. Joel parked near the back, away from the streetlights. I pulled into the McDonald's next door and watched him walk to room 237. 10 minutes later, Marta's silver Camry pulled into the lot. Seeing her get out of that car, checking her lipstick in the side mirror before walking to Joel's room, was like watching someone die. The woman I'd married, the mother of my children, the person I'd built my entire adult life around, disappeared forever in the space between her car and that motel room door. I sat in the McDonald's parking lot for 2 hours, watching the light in room 237, imagining what was happening behind those thin walls. When Marta finally emerged, smoothing down her skirt and checking her phone, I felt something inside me go completely cold. This wasn't just an affair. This was a betrayal, so complete, so calculated, that it demanded an equally calculated response. I drove home and waited for her to arrive with her story about the late presentation. When she walked through the door at 11:15, still smelling like Joel's cologne, I was sitting in my recliner with a beer and a smile. "How was the presentation?" I asked. "Exhausting," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I'm going to shower and head straight to bed." "Good idea," I said. "You'll want to be fresh for tomorrow." She paused at the bottom of the stairs, something in my tone making her look back. "Is everything okay, Danny?" "Everything's perfect," I told her. "Absolutely perfect." The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Murphy's gym on the south side of town. I hadn't been there in months, but the place never changed. The smell of sweat and determination, the rhythmic pounding of gloves against heavy bags, the quiet intensity of people working through their problems, one punch at a time. Dwayne Murphy looked up from the speed bag he was adjusting and grinned. "Well, look what the cat dragged in. Thought you'd gone soft on me, Danny boy." "Just taking a break from the soft life," I said, pulling on the boxing gloves I'd bought years ago in a fit of optimism about getting back in shape. Dwayne was 62, built like a fire hydrant, and had been running this gym since before I was born. He'd seen every kind of human drama walk through his doors, and he had an uncanny ability to read what people needed without them having to say it. "Woman troubles?" he asked, holding the heavy bag steady while I started working my combinations. "What makes you say that?" I grunted, throwing a right cross that sent vibrations up my arm. "Because you're hitting that bag like it owes you money, and you've got that look men get when they realize their whole life is built on a lie." I stopped punching and stared at him. "That obvious? Son, I've been married 4 times. I know the signs." He gestured toward the bench press. "You want to talk about it, or you want to work it out with iron and leather?" "Both," I said. For the next hour, Dwayne put me through a workout that left me gasping and dripping sweat onto the gym's scarred floor. Between sets, I told him about Marta and Joel, about the motel and the lies and the 23 years that suddenly felt like a joke. "So what are you going to do?" he asked when I finished. "I don't know yet." "Well, let me tell you something, Danny. You got 2 choices here. You can be a sufferer, or you can be a player. Sufferers get sympathy, players get results." "What's that supposed to mean?" Dwayne leaned against the heavy bag, his weathered face serious. "It means if you're going to fight, you better fight to win. Half measures and moral high ground are for people who can afford to lose." I thought about that on the drive home. Marta, his car was gone, and probably just another client lunch that would end at the Sleepy Inn. I sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee and staring at the refrigerator covered with family photos and kids' artwork from years past. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter, Amelia. "Dad, are you and Mom okay? She seemed weird when I called last night." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just some work stress." But everything wasn't fine. Everything was about as far from fine as it could get. And as I sat there in my empty house, surrounded by the debris of a marriage that was already over, I started planning exactly how I was going to make sure Joel Brennan and my wife understood the consequences of their choices. The first step was information. I needed to know everything about their affair, when it started, where they went, who else knew about it. Knowledge was power, and I was going to need every advantage I could get. I spent the rest of the day setting up what I privately called Operation Payback. I created a new email account, downloaded some basic surveillance apps, and started making a list of everyone in Marta's social and professional circle who might be useful allies or sources of information. By the time Marta came home that evening with another story about working late, I was ready to begin my campaign, and the beauty of being married to someone for over 2 decades is that you know all their passwords. Marta had been using variations of our anniversary date for everything since we met, and apparently even her affair hadn't inspired her to upgrade her cybersecurity. While she showered off the scent of her betrayal, I sat in my office with her laptop, methodically working through her digital life. Her email revealed a trail of messages with Joel going back 4 months. The early ones were flirtatious but innocent enough. Compliments about her presentation at some business networking event, suggestions for lunch, the kind of attention that a 44-year-old woman might find flattering after years of marriage routine. But they escalated quickly. By the second week, Joel was texting her photos of expensive jewelry that would look beautiful on you. By the third week, he was booking hotel rooms and sending her explicit messages that made my stomach turn. The worst part wasn't the Zex, it was the closeness. The way they talked about me, like I was some pathetic obstacle to their happiness. Joel called me the accountant, like it was a dirty word. Marta referred to me as Danny, with the kind of exasperated tone you'd use for a mildly annoying pet. Danny's working late again, she'd texted just last week. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a calculator. You deserve so much more, Joel had responded. A woman like you should be worshipped, not taken for granted. I printed out the worst of the messages and filed them in a folder marked evidence. Then I moved on to her social media accounts. Marta's Facebook was a carefully curated highlight reel of our supposedly happy marriage. Photos of family vacations, anniversary dinners, proud parent moments with our kids. But her private Instagram account, the one she thought I didn't know about, told a different story. There were photos of her at restaurants I'd never been to, wearing dresses I'd never seen. Pictures of her hands wearing jewelry I hadn't bought. Selfies taken in Joel's Corvette, cropped carefully to hide his face, but not his expensive watch. The comments were even more revealing. Her friend Lisa had written, "Get it, girl," under a photo of Marta in a low-cut dress. Her coworker Jennifer had commented, "Someone's glowing lately," with a string of winking emojis. They all knew. Marta's entire social circle was in on the joke, and I was the punchline. I was still scrolling through months of lies when I heard the shower turn off upstairs. I quickly closed the laptop and returned it to its spot on the kitchen counter, then settled into my recliner with a beer and the remote. Marta Kenschwaden came downstairs in her robe, her hair wrapped in a towel. She looked younger somehow, more vibrant than she had in years. Infidelity apparently agreed with her. "What are you watching?" she asked, settling onto the couch with her own drink. "Just the news," I said. "Same old disasters and corruption. Nothing changes." She glanced at me sharply, something in my tone catching her attention. "You seem different lately, Danny, distracted." "Work stuff," I said. "You know how it is." "Maybe we should plan a vacation," she said. "Just the two of us. We haven't done that in years." The suggestion was so absurd I almost laughed. A romantic getaway, with the woman who was screwing a used car salesman behind my back. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. "That sounds nice," I said. "Where were you thinking?" "I don't know. Somewhere warm. Somewhere we could reconnect." I looked at her sitting there in her robe, suggesting we reconnect while she was actively destroying our marriage. And I felt the last of my sympathy evaporate. "I'll look into it," I told her. But the only trip I was planning was Joel Brennan's journey from smug confidence to complete humiliation. And unlike Marta's romantic getaway fantasy, my vacation was definitely going to happen. Joel's morning routine was as predictable as his sales pitch. Coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, quick stop at the gym, then straight to the dealership by 9. He parked his Corvette in the same spot every day, angled to catch the morning sun like he was posing for a magazine cover. I waited until he was inside, schmoozing his first customer of the day. Then I made my move. The beauty of being an accountant is that people underestimate you. They see the khakis and the sensible shoes and assume you're harmless. What they don't realize is that managing other people's money requires a certain level of creative problem-solving and attention to detail. I'd spent 3 days watching Joel's routine, timing his movements, studying the layout of his dealership. I knew he took his lunch break at exactly noon, that his security cameras had a blind spot near the back fence, and that he was too vain to park his precious Corvette anywhere that might risk a door ding. The valve stem tool cost me $8 at AutoZone. It took exactly 30 seconds to let the air out of all 4 tires without actually damaging them. Another minute to slip a business card under his windshield wiper, my business card, with audit services available, written in red ink across the back. I was back in my car across the street, sipping coffee and reading the newspaper, when Joel discovered my handiwork. The man could have been heard in the next county. He stormed around his deflated Corvette like a bear with a thorn in its paw, waving his arms and shouting obscenities that would have made a sailor blush. When he found my business card, his face turned a shade of purple that couldn't possibly be healthy. He looked around the parking lot, his eyes scanning for threats, but I was just another middle-aged guy reading the sports section. Invisible. Harmless. Joel spent the next hour dealing with Apeway and a tow truck, his whole morning routine destroyed. His first 3 customers got tired of waiting and left. I watched him pace back and forth, constantly checking his phone, probably wondering if this was random vandalism or something more targeted. The doubt was the point. Joel Brennan was a hunter who relied on feeling in control, on being the alpha male who took what he wanted without consequences. Now he was looking over his shoulder, wondering who might be watching, who might know about his extracurricular activities. I drove home feeling better than I had in weeks. Marta was in the kitchen when I arrived, dressed for another day of pretending to be a faithful wife while planning her next rendezvous with her lover. "You're in a good mood," she observed, watching me pour coffee with what probably looked like suspicious cheerfulness. "Just a beautiful day," I said. "Sometimes you have to appreciate the simple pleasures in life." My phone buzzed with a text message, Joel apparently having figured out who was responsible for his morning inconvenience. "What the hell is wrong with you, you psycho? Stay away from my car or I'm calling the cops." I showed the message to Marta, watching her face carefully. "Weird. Some guy thinks I messed with his car. Must have me confused with someone else." She read the message and I saw something flicker across her features. Worry, maybe, or guilt. "That is weird," she agreed, but her voice was tight. "Maybe you should block the number." "Good idea," I said, deleting the message. No point in letting crazy people ruin your day. But I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was wondering if this was a coincidence, if somehow her two worlds were colliding. The uncertainty was delicious. I spent the rest of the day working on my real client's books, but my mind was already planning the next phase of Joel's education. The flat tires were just the opening move. I had bigger plans for Mr. Brennan, plans that would teach him exactly what happened to men who thought they could steal another man's life without paying the price. By the time Marta left for her late meeting that evening, I was already dressed in dark clothes and heading out for round 2. The Sleepy Inn's parking lot was a monument to poor life choices and flickering neon. I sat in my car at the McDonald's next door, watching Joel's replacement rental car, a sad little Hyundai that must have wounded his ego, parked outside room 237. Room 237 had become their regular spot, apparently. I'd confirmed it 3 times over the past week, watching Marta's silver Camry pull in 20 minutes after Joel's arrival, like some twisted dinner theater with a predictable schedule. Tonight was different, though. Tonight I wasn't just watching. I'd spent the afternoon at Home Depot, purchasing supplies for what I privately called Project Humiliation. Zip ties, a small Bluetooth speaker, and a can of washable spray paint. Nothing illegal, nothing permanent, but definitely memorable. At exactly 8:40 p.m., Marta in his car pulled into the lot. I watched her check her makeup in the mirror, smooth down her hair, and walk to room 237 with the confidence of a woman who thought her secrets were safe. I waited 30 minutes, long enough for them to get comfortable. Then I moved. The Hyundai's doors were unlocked. Joel's arrogance apparently extended to basic security. I slipped the Bluetooth speaker under the driver's seat, connected it to my phone, and queued up a playlist I'd spent considerable time curating. Then I zip-tied a small sign to his antenna. The sign read, "Honk if you've seen my wife," in large, friendly letters. The spray paint was for the windshield, washable, temporary but effective. "Adulterer," in bright red letters across the glass, visible from 50 yards away. I was back in my car, heart hammering with adrenaline, when I activated the speaker. The sound of gospel music at full volume erupted from Joel's car. "Amazing Grace" echoed across the parking lot like a divine intervention, followed immediately by a recording I'd found online of a fire and brimstone preacher ranting about the wages of sin. Lights came on in several motel rooms. A few guests emerged to investigate the disturbance. I saw curtains twitch in room 237. Then Joel's face appeared at the window, looking panicked. He rushed outside in his underwear and an undershirt, frantically trying to figure out where the music was coming from. The preacher's voice boomed across the parking lot. "And the Lord shall punish those who covet their neighbor's wife." Other guests were starting to gather, some laughing, others complaining about the noise. Someone was recording with their phone. Joel's humiliation was becoming a public spectacle, exactly as I'd planned. It took him 5 minutes to find the speaker and another 2 to figure out how to turn it off. By then, he'd drawn an audience of a dozen people, all staring at his spray-painted windshield and the sign fluttering from his antenna. Marta appeared in the doorway of room 237, clutching a bathrobe around herself. Even from across the parking lot, I could see her horror as she realized their affair was being broadcast to anyone with eyes and ears. Joel ripped the sign from his antenna and started scrubbing at the windshield with his undershirt, his face red with rage and embarrassment. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Hey, aren't you that car dealer from the commercials?" That's when Joel lost it completely. He started screaming at the crowd, threatening to call the police, demanding to know who was responsible. His voice cracked with fury and humiliation. "This is maltreatment," he shouted. "When I find out who did this, I'm going to destroy them." I started my car and drove slowly past the scene, just another curious driver checking out the commotion. Joel was still ranting. Marta had disappeared back into the room, and several people were definitely recording everything for social media posterity. The drive home was the most satisfying 20 minutes I'd had in months. Marta didn't come home until after 2 a.m., and when she did, she went straight to the guest bedroom. I lay in our empty bed, staring at the ceiling and planning my next move. Joel wanted to play games? He had no idea who he was dealing with. I was just getting started. The coffee shop on Main Street was the kind of place where the town's gossip network converged every morning like a parliament of social intelligence. I'd avoided it for years, preferring to grab my caffeine from drive-thrus and gas stations. But desperate times called for strategic socializing. I ordered a large black coffee and a blueberry muffin, then positioned myself at a table near the counter where I could overhear the morning's social intelligence briefings. "Did you hear about what happened at the Sleepy Inn?" Margaret Henley was saying to her companion, a woman I recognized but couldn't name. Margaret worked at the bank and had a reputation for knowing everyone's business before they knew it themselves. "With that car dealer? Joel something?" the other woman replied. "My daughter saw the video on TikTok. Apparently someone pranked him pretty good." "More than a prank," Margaret said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "My cousin works at the motel. She said he was there with a married woman. Someone's husband found out and decided to make a statement." I sipped my coffee and pretended to read the newspaper while absorbing every word. "Do we know who the woman was?" the unnamed woman asked. "Not yet, but it'll come out. It always does." I finished my coffee and left, but not before dropping a business card on Margaret's table. Danny Morrison, CPA, with my phone number. If she was half the gossip I thought she was, she'd remember the name when the story got more interesting. My next stop was the gym. Dwayne was working with a younger guy on the heavy bag, calling out combinations with the authority of someone who'd spent decades teaching people how to fight. "Danny," he called when he saw me. "Back for more punishment?" "Something like that," I said, pulling on my gloves. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm of punches and movement clearing my head. When we took a break, Dwayne studied my face with the intensity of a man who'd seen every kind of human drama. "You look different," he said. "More focused, like you've made some decisions." "Maybe I have." "Good. Indecision is what eliminates most men. They spend so much time thinking about what they should do, they never actually do anything." "What if what you're thinking about doing isn't exactly conventional?" Dwayne laughed, a rough sound that echoed off the gym's concrete walls. "Son, conventional is what got you into this mess. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, even if it means getting your hands dirty, especially then." He gestured around the gym, at the fighters working through their own problems with leather and sweat. "Every man in here is fighting something. The only question is whether you're fighting to win or just fighting to feel better about losing." I thought about that conversation all afternoon while I worked on my regular clients' books. Numbers had always made sense to me. They followed rules, they balanced, they told the truth even when people didn't want to hear it. But human relationships were messier, more complicated. They required different kinds of mathematics. That evening, Marta announced she was having dinner with her friend Lisa to discuss some work stuff. I nodded and wished her a good time, then waited exactly 30 minutes before calling the restaurant she'd mentioned. "Hi, I'm supposed to meet my wife and her friend Lisa for dinner," I told the hostess. "Has their table been seated yet?" "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have any reservations under that name for tonight." "Oh," I said, injecting just the right amount of confusion into my voice. "Maybe I got the restaurant wrong. Thanks anyway." Another lie. Another evening at the Sleepy Inn, probably. The pattern was becoming predictable, which meant it was time to disrupt it in a more permanent way. I spent the evening researching Joel's business. digging into public records and online reviews. Brennan's used cars had been operating for 8 years, with a steady stream of customer complaints about odometer tampering and undisclosed accident damage. Nothing that had stuck legally, but enough to paint a picture of a man who made his living by taking advantage of people who trusted him. The irony was perfect. Joel Brennan was a professional liar who'd met his match in an amateur with nothing left to lose. By the time Marta came home with her story about dinner and girl talk, I was ready to take our little game to the next level. The Hollow Lake Business Association's monthly mixer was held at the Marriott downtown, a gathering of local entrepreneurs, professionals, and social climbers who came to network and be seen. Marta had been attending these events for 3 years as part of her job at the advertising agency, and she'd mentioned that Joel would be there promoting his dealership. I'd never attended one before, but my CPA credentials got me through the door without questions. I paid my $20 entry fee, pinned on a name tag that read Danny Morrison Financial Services, and entered the ballroom with the confidence of a man who belonged there. The crowd was exactly what I'd expected. Middle-aged professionals in business casual attire, clutching drinks and business cards, while engaging in the kind of aggressive networking that passed for socializing in small-town business circles. I spotted Joel immediately. He was holding court near the bar, his voice carrying across the room as he told some story that involved dramatic hand gestures and frequent references to his own cleverness. He'd recovered from his motel humiliation enough to resume his natural role as the center of attention. Marta was across the room, talking to a group of women from various local businesses. She looked professional and composed, playing the role of the successful marketing executive with practiced ease. No one looking at her would guess she was living a double life. I approached the bar and ordered a beer, positioning myself close enough to Joel's group to overhear his conversation. The thing about the car business, he was saying, is that it's all about reading people. You have to know what they want before they know it themselves. Sounds like you're quite the psychologist, said a woman I recognized as the owner of a local boutique. You have to be, Joel replied. People lie to themselves all the time about what they can afford, what they need, what they really want. My job is to cut through the BS and give them what they actually need. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Here was a man who made his living manipulating people, who was currently manipulating my wife, lecturing others about honesty and authenticity. I waited for a lull in the conversation, then stepped into their circle with my most professional smile. Excuse me, I said to Joel. I couldn't help but overhear. You're Joel Brennan, right? From the commercials? His face lit up with the kind of recognition-hungry glow that confirmed everything I'd suspected about his ego. Guilty as charged, he said, extending his hand. And you are? Danny Morrison. I'm a CPA here in town. I shook his hand firmly, maintaining eye contact. I've actually been meaning to stop by your lot. I'm in the market for something reliable. Well, you've come to the right place, Joel said, his salesman instincts kicking into high gear. What kind of driving do you do? Daily commute, weekend adventures, family hauling? Mostly just getting around town, I said. Nothing too exciting. I'm pretty boring, actually, just working home. My wife says I need to get out more. Something flickered across Joel's face at the mention of my wife. A micro-expression that confirmed he knew exactly who I was. Well, he said, his voice slightly less enthusiastic than before, I'm sure we can find you something that fits your lifestyle. That's great, I said. I'll definitely stop by this week. Maybe bring my wife along. She's got better taste than I do when it comes to these things. Joel's smile became noticeably strained. Of course. Always happy to help. Both of you. I excused myself from the group and moved toward the appetizer table, but not before I saw Joel pull out his phone and start typing frantically, probably warning Marta that her husband was at the mixer, asking questions and making conversation. Sure enough, within 5 minutes, I saw Marta excuse herself from her group and head toward the ladies' room. Her phone was in her hand, and her face was tight with worry. I gave her 10 minutes, then approached her group with the same friendly professionalism I'd used on Joel. Excuse me, I said to the woman who seemed to be leading the conversation. I'm Danny Morrison. I think you know my wife, Marta. She stepped away for a moment, but I wanted to introduce myself. The woman's face brightened with recognition. Oh, you're Marta's husband. She talks about you all the time. I'm Jennifer Walsh, from Walsh Marketing. Nice to meet you, Jennifer. Marta's told me so much about her work colleagues. Your wife is amazing, another woman chimed in. So creative, so dedicated. We're always telling her she works too hard. She does put in a lot of hours, I agreed. Late nights, weekend meetings. I keep telling her she needs to find some balance. But you know how it is with passionate people. Oh, we know, Jennifer said with a laugh. She's always rushing off to some client dinner or presentation. Just last week, she was telling us about this big project that had her working until all hours. Which project was that? I asked casually. The Henderson account, I think? Or maybe it was the new restaurant campaign. Honestly, she's juggling so many things, it's hard to keep track. I nodded knowingly, filing away the information. Marta hadn't mentioned any Henderson account or restaurant campaign to me. More lies to add to the growing collection. When Marta returned from the ladies' room, her face was composed, but her eyes were sharp with suspicion. Danny, she said, her voice bright with forced surprise. What are you doing here? Thought I'd check out the local business scene, I said, giving her a kiss on the cheek. You're always talking about these events, so I figured I'd see what all the fuss was about. That's wonderful, she said, though her tone suggested it was anything but. I didn't know you were interested in networking. I'm full of surprises, I told her. In fact, I just met Joel Brennan. Interesting guy. We're going to look at cars this week. The color drained from Marta's face so quickly I thought she might faint. Cars, she managed to say. Yeah, I'm thinking it's time to upgrade from the old Honda. Joel says he's got some great deals on reliable sedans. I didn't know you were thinking about a new car. Like I said, full of surprises. We stayed at the mixer for another hour, making small talk and collecting business cards, but I could feel the tension radiating from Marta like heat from a furnace. She kept glancing toward Joel, who was doing his best to avoid our section of the room. On the drive home, she was quiet, staring out the passenger window at the dark streets of Hollow Lake. So, she finally said, what did you think of the mixer? Educational, I replied. Really eye-opening, actually. It's amazing what you can learn about people when you pay attention. She looked at me sharply, but I kept my eyes on the road and my expression neutral. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing specific, I said. Just that everyone has their public face and their private reality. Sometimes the difference is illuminating. We drove the rest of the way home in silence, but I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. The psychological pressure was building, and soon something would have to give. I was looking forward to finding out what. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was deep in sleep when my phone rang, jarring me awake with the kind of urgency that usually meant death or disaster. Danny Morrison? The voice was unfamiliar, official. Yes? This is Officer Martinez with the Hollow Lake Police Department. We need you to come to Mercy General Hospital immediately. My blood turned to ice water. What happened? Is it my wife? Sir, there's been an incident involving your wife and another individual. Can you get here within the next 30 minutes? I was already reaching for my clothes. Is she hurt? What kind of incident? I can't discuss details over the phone, sir. Just please get here as soon as you can. The drive to the hospital was a blur of streetlights and worst-case scenarios. Had Marta been in an accident? Had Joel hurt her? Had my campaign of psychological warfare pushed someone over the edge? The emergency room was bright and sterile, filled with the kind of fluorescent urgency that made everything feel surreal. Officer Martinez was a compact woman in her 30s with tired eyes and the demeanor of someone who'd seen too much human stupidity for one shift. Mr. Morrison, thank you for coming. I need to ask you some questions about your whereabouts this evening. My whereabouts? What the hell is going on? Where's my wife? Your wife is fine, sir. She's giving a statement to my partner right now. But we have a situation involving Joel Brennan, and your name has come up in connection with some recent incidents. The pieces started falling into place. Whatever had happened tonight, Joel had decided to blame me for it. What kind of situation? I asked. Mr. Brennan was found in his car outside the Sleepy Inn Motel approximately 2 hours ago. Someone had zip-tied him to the steering wheel and covered his windshield with what appears to be honey. He was also, well, he was in a state of undress. I blinked, processing this information. And you think I did this? Mr. Brennan seems to think so. He's been telling anyone who'll listen that you've been maltreating him for weeks. Vandalism, threats, stalking. He wants to press charges. That's ridiculous, I said. though I had to admire whoever had escalated my little pranks into something so beautifully humiliating. I was home all evening. You can check with my wife. Officer Martinez gave me a look that suggested she was well aware of the irony in that statement. About your wife, Mr. Morrison. I have to ask, are you aware that she was at the motel tonight? The question hit like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting it. Having your marriage's destruction confirmed by a police officer in a hospital waiting room was a special kind of humiliation. I suspected, I said quietly. Mr. Brennan claims that you've been stalking them, that you've been threatening him, and that tonight's incident was an escalation of your maltreatment campaign. And what does my wife say? Your wife corroborates Mr. Brennan's account of your recent behavior. She says you've been acting strangely, that you've been following her, and that she's been afraid to confront you about it. The betrayal was complete. Not only had Marta been cheating on me, but now she was actively helping her lover build a case against me. I want to see her, I said. I don't think that's a good idea right now, sir. I want to see my wife, I repeated, my voice carrying an edge that made Officer Martinez take a step back. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Room 3, but Mr. Morrison, any threats, any aggressive behavior, and you'll be leaving in handcuffs. Room 3 was a small consultation area with plastic chairs and motivational posters about wellness and recovery. Marta sat at a small table across from another police officer, her eyes red from crying, her clothes disheveled. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment I saw something that might have been shame cross her face. But it was quickly replaced by defiance. Danny, she said, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Are you? I asked, taking the chair across from her. Are you really sorry, Marta, or are you just sorry you got caught? The other officer, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, cleared his throat. Sir, I need to remind you that this conversation is being recorded. Good, I said, never taking my eyes off my wife. I want there to be a record of this. Danny, please, Marta said. I know you're angry, but what you did tonight... What I did tonight? I interrupted. What exactly do you think I did tonight? You know what you did. The zip ties, the honey, leaving Joel tied up like that. It was cruel and humiliating, and you think I'm capable of something like that? She stared at me, and I saw the exact moment when doubt crept into her certainty. The Danny I married wouldn't have been, she said slowly. But you've changed. You've become someone I don't recognize. I've become someone who knows the truth, I said. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you mean? I leaned back in my chair, suddenly feeling calmer than I had in weeks. I mean, are you going to keep lying? Are you going to keep pretending this is my fault? Or are you going to take responsibility for destroying our marriage? Marta's composure finally cracked. Our marriage was already destroyed, Danny. It's been dead for years, and you know it. We've been going through the motions, pretending everything was fine, but we both knew it wasn't. So you decided to fix it by screwing a used car salesman? I decided to find someone who made me feel alive again, she shouted. Someone who paid attention to me, who made me feel beautiful and wanted and appreciated. And I didn't? When was the last time you really looked at me, Danny? When was the last time you told me I was beautiful? When was the last time you seemed excited to see me walk through the door? The questions hung in the air between us like accusations. And the terrible thing was, she wasn't entirely wrong. We had been going through the motions. We had been taking each other for granted. But that didn't justify what she'd done. That didn't excuse the lies and the betrayal and the way she'd made me feel like a fool in my own life. So instead of talking to me about it, I said, instead of trying to fix what was broken, you decided to have an affair. And now you're helping your boyfriend frame me for something I didn't do. You didn't zip-tie Joel to his steering wheel? No, Marta, I didn't. She studied my face, and I could see her trying to read the truth in my expression. But you did other things, she said. The flat tires, the speaker in his car, the spray paint. You've been stalking us. I could have denied it. I could have lied the way she'd been lying. But suddenly I was tired of the games. Yes, I said, I did those things. Why? Because you humiliated me. Because you made me feel like nothing. Because you took 23 years of marriage and threw it away for a man who sells used cars and thinks he's God's gift to women. Marta was crying again, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of anger and frustration and guilt. I never meant for it to happen, she said. It just did. Bees, I said. You made choices. Every text message, every hotel room, every lie you told me about working late. Those were all choices. And now you're making another choice by sitting here trying to destroy me instead of taking responsibility for what you've done. The young police officer was looking increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of our conversation. Mr. Morrison, he said, I think maybe we should... We should what? I asked. Pretend this is just about vandalism and maltreatment? Pretend that my wife isn't trying to send me to jail to cover up her own guilt? I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the whole situation. You want to press charges against me for flattening some tires and playing gospel music in a parking lot? Go ahead. But don't pretend you're the sufferer here, Marta. Don't pretend you didn't earn every second of humiliation you felt tonight. I walked toward the door, then turned back. And for the record, whoever zip-tied your boyfriend to that steering wheel did a better job of making him look ridiculous than I ever could have managed. Maybe you should ask yourself who else might have a problem with Joel Brennan's business practices. I left them sitting there and walked out of the hospital into the pre-dawn darkness. My marriage was over, my wife was helping her lover try to have me arrested, and I was probably going to need a lawyer. But for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. The call from my lawyer came 3 days later. Sarah Chen was a family law attorney I'd found through a referral from one of my clients, and she had the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she'd seen every variety of human dysfunction in her 15 years of practice. Good news and bad news, she said without preamble. The bad news is that Joel Brennan is still pushing for maltreatment charges. The good news is that his credibility is taking a beating. What do you mean? Turns out your friend Mr. Brennan has made some enemies in the business community. The police have received 3 separate complaints about his sales practices in the past 2 weeks, and someone leaked his customer complaint file to the local newspaper. He's got bigger problems than zip ties and gospel music. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Any idea who leaked the file? No, but whoever it was knew exactly what they were doing. The timing is too perfect to be coincidental. What about the charges against me? Still pending, but I think we can get them reduced or dropped entirely, especially if we can prove that someone else was responsible for the zip tie incident. Any leads on that? Actually, yes. The security camera at the gas station across from the motel caught something interesting. A woman in a dark SUV parked there for about an hour before the incident. The footage isn't clear enough to identify her, but it's enough to establish reasonable doubt about your involvement. A woman. That was unexpected. Joel's list of potential enemies was apparently more diverse than I'd imagined. There's something else, Sarah continued. Your wife filed for divorce this morning. I'd been expecting it, but hearing it officially still felt like a punch to the gut. What are the terms? Standard no-fault divorce. She's asking for half of everything, including the house. No alimony request, which suggests she's confident about her financial future. Probably planning to move in with Joel, I said. About that, there's been an interesting development. Joel Brennan's ex-wife has filed for emergency custody of their kids. Apparently, she's been documenting his affairs for months, building a case that he's an unfit father. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Joel's ex-wife would have had access to his schedule, his habits, his weaknesses. She would have known about his regular visits to the Sleepy Inn, and she would have had every reason to want him humiliated and exposed. Think she's our zip tie artist? I asked. It's possible, and if she is, it means Joel's got bigger problems than a maltreatment case. Custody battles are expensive, messy, and very public. His reputation is about to get a lot worse. After I hung up with Sarah, I sat in my office staring at the divorce papers that had been delivered by courier. 23 years reduced to legal boilerplate and property division schedules. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Coffee, I think we should talk. Monica Brennan. Joel's ex-wife. This was getting interesting. I met Monica at the same coffee shop where I'd eavesdropped on the town's gossip network. She was a petite woman in her early 40s with the kind of sharp intelligence that probably made Joel nervous even when they were married. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. I know this is awkward, but I think we have some common interests. Such as making sure Joel Brennan faces consequences for his actions. She opened her purse and pulled out a thick manila folder. I've been documenting my ex-husband's affairs for 8 months, she said. Photos, receipts, witness statements. Your wife isn't his first sufferer, and she won't be his last. I opened the folder and found myself looking at a comprehensive investigation that would have impressed a professional private detective. Joel with different women at different hotels. Credit card receipts for jewelry and dinners. Text message screenshots that made my stomach turn. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because Joel is trying to destroy you to protect himself. He's convinced the police that you're some kind of dangerous stalker, and he's using your wife to corroborate his story. And you don't think I am a dangerous stalker? Monica smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Oh, I think you're definitely dangerous, but not in the way Joel thinks. You're dangerous because you're smart, and you're methodical, and you're not going to let this go. What do you want from me? I want you to help me destroy him. Legally, publicly, and completely. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. I know you didn't zip-tie Joel to that steering wheel. You're too smart for something that crude. But I also know you've been making his life difficult, and I respect that. Are you saying you were the one who... I'm saying that Joel Brennan has hurt a lot of people, and sometimes hurt people find creative ways to express their feelings. I studied her face, looking for tells, for signs of deception or instability. What I saw was a woman who'd been pushed too far and had decided to push back. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. Joel's reputation is built on his image as a successful businessman and a charming ladies' man. Take away that reputation and his whole world collapses. His dealership, his social standing, his ability to manipulate women, it all depends on people believing his act. And how do we take that away? Monica's smile widened. By giving the people of Hollow Lake a front row seat to the real Joel Brennan. By making sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man he really is. She slid a business card across the table. Think about it, but don't think too long. Joel's planning to escalate his campaign against you, and your wife is helping him do it. What do you mean? They're going to claim you threatened them. They're going to say you're unstable, possibly dangerous. They're going to try to get a restraining order that will make you look like an abusive husband. The betrayal was breathtaking in its completeness. Marta wasn't just leaving me for another man. She was actively trying to destroy my reputation to make herself feel better about her choices. When? I asked. Soon, maybe as early as tomorrow. I looked down at the folder of evidence, at the documentation of Joel's systematic destruction of other people's marriages, and I made my decision. What do you need me to do? Monica's smile became genuinely warm for the first time since we'd sat down. I need you to be exactly what you've been all along, she said. Smart, patient, and absolutely ruthless when it comes to protecting what's yours. My marriage is over, I pointed out. Your marriage is over, she agreed. But your reputation, your dignity, your right to live in this town without being labeled a dangerous stalker, those things are worth fighting for. She was right. Joel and Marta had taken my marriage, but I wasn't going to let them take everything else. What's the plan, woman? I asked. Monica opened another folder, this one containing what looked like a detailed timeline and a series of photographs. The plan, she said, is to give Joel Brennan exactly what he deserves. The Hollow Lake Community Center had been hosting the annual Business Excellence Awards for 15 years, and it was exactly the kind of event where Joel Brennan would expect to be celebrated. Local entrepreneurs gathered to pat each other on the back, hand out plaques, and pretend that selling used cars or running a pizza franchise made them titans of industry. Monica's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Joel would be receiving an award for customer service excellence, an award that Monica had arranged through her connections on the Chamber of Commerce. The ceremony would be packed with local business owners, their families, and a reporter from the Hollow Lake Gazette, who covered these events religiously. The beauty of it, Monica explained as we sat in her car outside the community center, is that Joel's ego won't let him skip this. He thinks he's bulletproof right now. Your wife has convinced him that you're finished, that the maltreatment charges will stick, and that he's won. What if he doesn't show? He'll show. I've been married to him for 8 years. I know exactly how his mind works. The parking lot was filling up with the kind of mid-range luxury cars that screamed moderately successful small business owner. I spotted Joel's replacement rental car. He'd upgraded from the Hyundai to a BMW that probably cost him more per month than most people's mortgages. There, Monica said, pointing toward the entrance. Right on time. Joel emerged from the BMW wearing what was clearly his best suit, his hair perfectly styled, his confidence radiating across the parking lot like cologne. He was playing the role of the successful businessman who'd overcome recent adversity through sheer determination and superior character. Marta wasn't with him, which was a small mercy. I wasn't sure I was ready to see her playing the supportive girlfriend at Joel's moment of triumph. Phase 1, Monica said, checking her phone. The reporter should be getting an interesting email right about now. She'd timed everything perfectly. Just as Joel was walking into the community center to accept his award, Rebecca Martinez from the Gazette was receiving a comprehensive package of documents detailing Joel's business practices, his history of customer complaints, and his pattern of targeting married women. Phase 2 happens during his acceptance speech, Monica continued. That's when things get really interesting. We waited in the car for another 20 minutes, watching late arrivals hurry into the building. Monica was calm, almost serene, in a way that suggested she'd been planning this moment for a long time. Aren't you nervous? I asked. Nervous? No, I'm excited. Do you know how long I've wanted to watch Joel's world fall apart in public? What if this backfires? What if people don't believe the evidence? Monica turned to look at me, and her expression was absolutely certain. Danny, I've spent 8 years watching Joel manipulate people. I know his weaknesses better than anyone. His ego, his need to be the center of attention, his complete inability to shut up when he should, those are going to destroy him tonight. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen. Restraining order hearing scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. They're moving fast. I showed the message to Monica, who nodded grimly. Told you. Joel wants you neutralized before anyone starts asking questions about his business practices. This better work, I said. It'll work, trust me. We got out of the car and walked toward the community center. The awards ceremony was already underway, and we could hear applause and laughter coming from the main hall. Remember, Monica said as we approached the entrance, you're here as a concerned citizen who received an anonymous tip about corruption in the local business community. You're not here for revenge, you're here for justice. And you? I'm here as a taxpayer who's concerned about the Chamber of Commerce giving awards to businesses with questionable practices. We entered the building and found seats in the back of the main hall. The ceremony was exactly what I'd expected. A parade of local business owners accepting plaques and making speeches about community values and customer service. Joel was scheduled to speak fourth, after the owner of a successful bakery, a woman who ran a popular boutique, and a man who'd built a small chain of hardware stores. We sat through the first 3 presentations, politely applauding while Monica checked her phone and monitored the timing of her carefully orchestrated plan. Ladies and gentlemen, the master of ceremonies announced, our next recipient has built one of the most successful automotive businesses in the region. Despite recent challenges, he's maintained his commitment to customer satisfaction and community involvement. Please join me in welcoming Joel Brennan of Brennan's Used Cars. The applause was enthusiastic, but not overwhelming. Joel walked to the podium with the confidence of a man who believed he'd weathered the storm and emerged victorious. Thank you, he said, accepting his plaque and positioning himself behind the microphone. This is truly an honor. He launched into a prepared speech about perseverance, integrity, and the importance of treating customers like family. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. In business as in life, Joel said, you're only as good as your reputation. People need to trust you, to know that you'll stand behind your word and do the right thing even when it's difficult. That's when Monica's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and smiled. Phase 2, she whispered. Rebecca Martinez from the Gazette had arrived. I could see her in the back of the room, checking her phone and looking around the crowd with the sharp attention of a reporter who'd just received a very interesting story. Joel was still speaking, warming to his theme of business ethics and community responsibility when Rebecca started making her way toward the front of the room. The automotive business has its challenges, Joel continued, but I've always believed that honesty and transparency are the best policies. When you treat people fairly, when you give them value for their money, success follows naturally. Rebecca had reached the front row and was now taking notes, her presence beginning to draw attention from other audience members. In closing, Joel said, I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for this recognition, and I want to promise the people of Hollow Lake that Brennan's used cars will continue to set the standard for excellence in automotive sales. The applause was polite but distracted. People had noticed Rebecca's note-taking, and there was a subtle shift in the room's energy. Joel stepped away from the podium, still holding his plaque, when Rebecca stood up. Mr. Brennan, she called out, her voice carrying clearly across the room. Rebecca Martinez from the Gazette. I wonder if you could comment on the allegations that your dealership has been engaging in odometer fraud and selling vehicles with undisclosed accident damage? The room went completely silent. Joel's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, recognition, and then panic, in the space of about 3 seconds. I'm sorry, what? He managed to say. I've received documentation suggesting that your business has been the subject of multiple complaints to the Better Business Bureau and the State Attorney General's office. Would you care to respond to these allegations? Joel looked around the room, searching for allies, for escape routes, for anyone who might help him navigate this sudden disaster. Those are baseless accusations from disgruntled customers, he stammered. Every business gets complaints. What about the pattern of targeting married women for romantic relationships? Rebecca continued, consulting her notes. I have documentation of at least 6 affairs over the past 3 years, including your current relationship with Marta Morrison, who's married to a member of this community. The room erupted. People turned to stare at Joel, at each other, at me sitting in the back row. The master of ceremonies looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Joel's face had gone from pale to bright red. This is a setup. This is maltreatment. Are you denying the allegations? Rebecca asked. I'm not answering any more questions without my lawyer. Joel clutched his plaque and pushed through the crowd toward the exit. But the damage was done. The entire room was buzzing with shocked conversation, and I could see people pulling out their phones to start spreading the news. Monica leaned over and whispered, Phase 3. As Joel reached the exit, the doors opened to admit 2 men in suits who looked very much like law enforcement. Joel Brennan, one of them called out, we're with the State Attorney General's office. We'd like to ask you some questions about your business practices. Joel stopped dead in his tracks, trapped between the crowd of shocked business owners behind him and the investigators in front of him. This is persecution, he shouted. I'm being set up by a vindictive ex-husband. That's when I stood up. Actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet room, I'm right here, and I had nothing to do with this. Every head in the room turned to look at me. I walked slowly toward the front, feeling the weight of dozens of stares. My name is Danny Morrison, I said. Joel Brennan has been having an affair with my wife. He's also been trying to have me arrested on the false maltreatment charges to cover up his own criminal behavior. I looked directly at Joel, who was standing frozen in the doorway like a deer in headlights. The difference between us, I continued, is that I never broke any laws. I never defrauded customers. I never destroyed families for my own entertainment. The investigators were moving toward Joel, and he seemed to realize that his world was collapsing in real time. You did this! He screamed at me. You orchestrated this whole thing. No, I said calmly. You did this. Every choice you made, every lie you told, every person you hurt, this is the natural consequence of your own actions. Joel tried to push past the investigators, but they were ready for him. Within seconds, he was in handcuffs, his award plaques scattered on the floor, his reputation destroyed in front of the entire business community. As they led him away, the room erupted in conversation. People were pulling out phones, calling friends, already spreading the story across Hollow Lake's gossip network. Monica appeared at my elbow, her face glowing with satisfaction. How does it feel? She asked. I watched Joel disappear through the doors, his shouts echoing in the hallway. Like justice, I said. The restraining order, hearing the next day, was a formality. With Joel in custody and facing multiple charges related to his business practices, his credibility as a witness had evaporated overnight. The maltreatment charges against me were dropped, and Marta's testimony about my threatening behavior was revealed to be a desperate attempt to support her lover's legal strategy. I sat in the courthouse waiting room, watching Marta pace back and forth like a caged animal. She'd aged years in the past 24 hours. The confident, successful woman who'd been living a double life had been replaced by someone who looked lost and frightened. Danny, she said when she noticed me watching her, we need to talk. I think we've said everything we need to say. Please, just 5 minutes. I followed her to a quiet corner of the waiting room, curious to hear what she thought she could possibly say that would matter now. I'm sorry, she began. I know that doesn't mean much, but I need you to know that I never wanted things to end this way. How did you want them to end? I don't know. I thought maybe we could work something out. A quiet divorce, split everything fairly, move on with our lives. While you helped Joel frame me for maltreatment, she had the grace to look ashamed. That was his idea. He convinced me that you were dangerous, that you might hurt us if we didn't protect ourselves. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. It was easier than admitting that I'd thrown away my marriage for a man who turned out to be a criminal. I studied her face, looking for signs of the woman I'd married 23 years ago. She was still there, buried under layers of guilt and regret and poor choices. What happens now? I asked. I don't know. Joel's lawyer says he might be looking at serious prison time. The Attorney General's office found evidence of systematic fraud going back years. What about us? There is no us anymore, Danny. We both know that. She was right, of course. Even if I could forgive her for the affair, I couldn't forgive her for trying to destroy me to cover it up. The house is yours, she said quietly. I don't want anything from the divorce except my personal belongings. That's not necessary. Yes, it is. It's the least I can do. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Two people who'd shared most of their adult lives and now had nothing left to say to each other. For what it's worth, Marta said finally, you were right about Joel. He was using me just like he used all the others. I'm sorry you had to learn that the hard way. Are you, really? I thought about it honestly. I'm sorry you got hurt. I'm not sorry that Joel got what he deserved. She nodded, understanding the distinction. I heard Monica Brennan helped orchestrate his downfall. Monica's been documenting his behavior for months. She was just waiting for the right moment to use it. And you gave her that moment. Joel gave her that moment when he decided to try to frame me for maltreatment. Marta's lawyer appeared and called her over for a brief conference. When she returned, her face was grim. Joel wants to make a deal, she said. He's offering to testify about his business practices in exchange for reduced charges. What does that have to do with you? He wants me to corroborate his story about you being unstable. He thinks it will help his case if he can show that his sufferers' families were threatening him. And will you? She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her expression that reminded me of the woman I'd fallen in love with decades ago. No, she said, I won't. Why not? Because whatever else I've done, I won't compound it by lying under oath to help a man who was just using me. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a significant one. Maybe Marta had finally learned something about the consequences of her choices. The hearing itself lasted less than 30 minutes. Without Joel's testimony and with the maltreatment charges dropped, the restraining order request was denied. I walked out of the courthouse, a free man, legally and emotionally. Monica was waiting for me on the courthouse steps, looking like someone who'd just won the lottery. How does it feel to be vindicated? She asked. Like the first day of the rest of my life. Any regrets? I thought about it seriously. I regret that my marriage ended. I regret that it took something like this to show me who Marta really was. But I don't regret fighting back. Good. Joel's going to prison, his business is finished, and his reputation is destroyed. Justice served. What about you? What's next? Monica smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, it was completely genuine. I'm taking my kids and moving to Florida. Fresh start, new life, far away from the mess Joel made of everything. That sounds perfect. What about you? Staying in Hollow Lake? I looked around at the town I'd lived in for most of my adult life, at the streets where everyone now knew my story, at the place where I'd been humiliated and vindicated in equal measure. Yeah, I said. I think I am. Why? Because running away would feel like admitting I did something wrong, and I didn't do anything wrong. Monica nodded approvingly. Joel always said you were tougher than you looked. Joel was right about that, at least. We shook hands on the courthouse steps, two people who'd been hurt by the same man and had found a way to make him pay for it. As I walked to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. My marriage was over, my reputation was intact, and Joel Brennan was facing the consequences of his choices. It wasn't the ending I'd planned for my life, but it was an ending I could live with. 6 months later, I was sitting in Murphy's gym after a particularly satisfying workout when Dwayne approached with a newspaper in his hand. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said, handing me the Hollow Lake Gazette. The headline read, "Former car dealer sentenced to 3 years for fraud." Below it was a photo of Joel in handcuffs, looking nothing like the confident hunter who'd destroyed my marriage. "How does it feel?" Dwayne asked. I folded the newspaper and set it aside. "Like closure. Good. Now what?" I looked around the gym at the fighters working through their own problems with determination and sweat, and I realized I'd found something I hadn't expected. Peace. "Now I live my life," I said, "on my own terms." Joel Brennan had taken my wife, but he hadn't taken my dignity. He'd tried to destroy my reputation, but he'd only succeeded in destroying his own. In the end, the truth had been stronger than his lies, and justice had been more powerful than his manipulations. I walked out of the gym into the evening air of Hollow Lake, a free man in every sense of the word. The town might remember my story, but they'd remember it as the story of a man who fought back and won. And that was a reputation I could live with.
보조 배터리 한번 사갈까? 응. 나 핫스팟 켤 수 있음?
나 배터리 77%인데?
아 그럼 너 걸로 할까?
그래야 되고.
아 일단 보조 배터리 사고 중간에 꺼지면 너 걸로 하자. 아 처음부터 너 걸로 할까 그냥? 한 번만. 아 그거 말고 핸드폰. 검땡씨 아직 좌표 찍지 말아줘요. 핸드폰 한 번만 바꾸게.
그냥 보배 사라.
보배 사? 나비 뽑았다.
나 빼띠.
나 뽑았디. 나비 뽑. 아 지금 찍어줘요. 죄송해요. 아 뭐야 이 개새끼야.
나 아니야.
죄송해요 검땡땡땡씨. 나비 뽑았다. 괜찮소. 잠시만 제 주머니 속으로 들어가 주세요. 일회용 보조 배터리. 아 여기. 감사합니다. 자, 이거 보면